because it's kind of getting back to being a supervisor or being assigned a managerial role. Isn't it?
That's a huge grant of leadership. That isn't not. That's a grant that a collective sees you as a leader.
But that doesn't happen that much in organizations, right?
It doesn't happen that you get appointed supervisor?
No, as a group, we select you as a manager or a supervisor.
No, not the group of followers. It's a collective endorsement. We all buy into the institutions we join. So, when you join an organization, you buy into the supervisor's right to ask you to do stuff. And you buy into the higher level supervisor's right to appoint lower level supervisors that they think are good. And so we all kind of know that. So when someone gets appointed to a supervisor role, it makes it more likely that that person will claim a leader identity, at least we hope, right? And more likely that we would grant that person a leader identity, because we're all bought into that overlying institution and its set of implicit rules. Yes?
Yes.
Maybe. Okay.
How do you make the difference between granting some merit to a person and granting him an identity of leadership? I mean, sometimes I would elect somebody because I think he's a hard worker, but not because he's a leadership or something like that. So
we can't distinguish. We don't know in that case. But it might be that you're granting because a hard worker, and he interprets, he sees me as a leader. And the messages aren't perfect in the social world. Right? There's a lot of ambiguity, a lot of dirty data that people interpret. So, we don't know. Yes? I do have studies to get to.
I was just thinking, this whole things you're telling about, it sounds like it takes some time before these things develop. So I was basically thinking about the emergence of leaders in more crisis emergency situations, where there's no particular person who
would be a good place to study.
Would you say that the same kind of process is behind that? For instance, people had it already in their minds that one person could be a leader, and they very immediately, grant that leadership status to one person in the group, or that person already had that bubble, a small bubble there, and has not really acted on it. And suddenly starts acting on it when people either grant it or he decides to claim it? Or should I be just thinking about these things only in regular?
No, I don't think they necessarily take a long time. But remember I said early theorizing? We don't know.
Okay.
Like one of the things that I think is fascinating to study is a group of MBAs on day one of the MBA program asked to do a collective task. And, you watch all sorts of things, because I ran our leadership program for 4 years and we did this a lot, and you watch a lot of things happen. Like you watch some people make big claims for leadership, and then 2 months later, nobody wants anything to do with that person. It just, and you watch other people emerge immediately as leaders among these leaders. They were, these are high-level students in terms of what they have accomplished in life and so forth. And it's a little mysterious. There's a lot we don't know. We're just trying to say this might be worth studying. And that's this kind of theory paper. Yes?
You said leadership is good, you just
it's an organization. It's a positive valued identity.
Positively valued. Yeah. But of course there are bad leaders, right? I mean, is definition of leadership is only encompasses the good, or it also covers the bad?
Leadership literature has a lot of trouble with this question. A lot of people say that leadership is a process that should be studied irrespective of ends. So Hitler was a good leader. A lot of people have a lot of issues with that and say, no, you can't. There's got to be a value set, an orientation towards the collective good that's part of leadership, and blah, blah. That's a whole argument that I don't want to get into today. But
I mean, I guess Penan's question was about that, because when somebody is granted a position in an organization, he may be or she may be granted that position not because of and hence that's how I interpreted her question at least.
And all I would say, what this perspective would say, is that when granted that position, the bad or the good leader would probably be more likely to make claims of leadership within the group.
Even more.
Whether they're granted that, the fact that we exist in an institution where we're very socialized to defer to authority, they probably start out granting that and might stop over time with the bad leaders they found. This makes no sense. But you look at Enron. People kept granting, even though those leaders were pretty corrupt. Okay, last point.
I was just wondering if there can be invisible leaders, so they don't have a formal power, and
Yes.
even if they're not recognized informally as opinion leaders, but they sort of make people do stuff, and the people think it was their idea to start.
That's really nice.
Is that something else?
Moms work that way.
No, it very well could be. It's not what we're studying, but it's, I think that very well could be. Okay, I'm moving ahead, just, chances are the questions you have will come up again. So this sort of takes us where you were taking us, which is, then we started to say, okay, what's going to predict claiming and granting frequency or effectiveness? And we articulated 3 things, and then we added a 4th, and it's the 4th that's going to be the focus of these studies. So the 3 things we looked at is what I just described to you. If you're in a supervisory role, you're going to do more of this. We also thought the risk of leadership would predict whether you're going to do more claiming and granting. So if we're going into a very high-risk situation where it wasn't clear how well we were going to do, I might really want you to be the leader, because we know that success and failure gets attributed to the leader. And so you see a lot of pushing, of leadership onto other people at times when the risk is high. And then the third one is a concept that exists in the leadership literature called implicit leadership theories. And that we walk around, in our heads, we have a theory of what a leader is. And when a person matches our theory, we grant them leadership. Okay? And sometimes, so there's a large literature on this. People study the attributes of sensitive, dynamic, intelligent, and there's a couple others that, and when we see that, we're more likely to grant them a leadership identity. So we were looking at a 4th predictor, and this is kind of the second half of the theory paper. And I'll tell you how we came to this. Well, I'll tell you what it is, and I'll tell you how we came to it. And we're looking at something that we ended up calling a leadership structure schema. And this is a mental model of how leadership is best structured in groups and other collective settings. And here's how we came to this. In our theory paper, this actually was one of the most generative review processes I've ever participated in, the review process for this paper. Our reviewers were good and smart and had great ideas. And we had a whole section of our paper that laid out what was going to happen when more than one person wanted to claim a leader identity. Conflict, it was going to be bad. And, and we had in mind these MBA groups. You've seen them on day one where like 5 of them want to be the leader and it's ugly. So that's what we had in mind. And that's what we laid out in our paper. And one of the reviewers so caught us in our own assumption that it became fascinating to us. And the reviewer said, all of this will only happen if you assume there's only can be one leader. And it was so true. We had that assumption. I think many of our MBA students have that assumption. And that's what we were carrying into our theorizing. And so that was so striking to us that we started to say, well, maybe there's a variable there. That people carry assumptions in, either that leadership should, it's normative, it's not just descriptive, should be done by many people and shared among group members. Now, if I had that assumption, and I'm an MBA student, and I come in and she's leading too, my reaction would be, oh, cool, there's going to be a lot of leaders in this group. That's going to be great, right? Or leadership should be done by one person in a group, leader and follower identities are mutually exclusive. So then if I see her leading, I might feel threatened. I might amp up my leadership to compete with her leadership. So that's the idea, and what we're going to look at in the studies is the effect of this variable on leadership processes. So, the literature suggests that a hierarchical presumption dominates our view, that we're wired to think hierarchically. You can see references to single leader assumption way back to Bion's work. And I love this quote. This is by 2 Europeans who argued that leadership is a special case of an iatrogenic social myth. That means a social myth we do ourselves, that induces massive learned helplessness among members of the social system, right? So it's this myth we have, there's a hierarchy, so like, I can't do